I had just finished tightening the chain on my bike when the garage door banged open so hard it rattled the windows. My coffee sat half-drunk on the workbench, steam curling into the cool Sunday air. Holly stormed in, ponytail swinging, a thick blue folder clutched under her arm like she was delivering bad news to a death row inmate. "We need to take this seriously," she said, voice clipped. I straightened up, wiping my hands on a rag. "Take what seriously?" She slapped the folder onto my workbench, scattering a couple of bolts. "Your lack of ambition." I blinked at her. "My what?" "I've been talking to a business coach," she said, flipping open the folder to a glossy pamphlet. Some smiling woman in her 50s posed in front of a wall of fake plants under the words, "Unlock your true potential." "She's been helping me understand why you're stuck. Why you never push yourself." I tightened my jaw. "You've been talking to a coach about me?" "Don't get defensive," she snapped. "This is for us. I've signed you up for 10 career development workshops at the co-working hub downtown. Mandatory. First one's Tuesday." My laugh came out short and humorless. "Mandatory. Yes. 10 weeks. And if you're not showing progress by Labor Day." She took a breath like she was about to announce the weather. "We're done." I stared at her, the words hanging between us like exhaust fumes. "You're serious," I said finally. "I already paid for the first session," she added quickly, almost triumphant. "Non-refundable. So don't even start with excuses." I picked up my coffee, let the heat sink into my hand for a second, then set it back down. "Fine," I said. She frowned. "Fine? That's it." I stepped around her, reached for a wrench on the pegboard. "I'll go to your workshop. I'll go to all 10. But let's be clear, I'm doing it because you're demanding it. Not because I think there's a damn thing wrong with how I live." Her mouth opened like she had a comeback ready, but nothing came out. "Tuesday, right?" I said. "I'll be there." She grabbed the folder, clearly thrown by how quickly I'd agreed, and marched back toward the door. "Don't make me regret this," she tossed over her shoulder. I tightened the last bolt on the bike chain and heard the garage door slam shut. The smell of gasoline and coffee lingered in the air, and I went right back to work. Miss Callahan's office smelled faintly of cinnamon tea and lemon cleaner, the kind of scent that's supposed to make you relax. Fake plants lined the windowsill, and every wall had some framed quote about chasing dreams or unlocking potential. She sat behind a small glass desk, pen poised over a yellow legal pad. "Why don't we start with why you're both here?" I leaned back in the chair. Holly didn't. She straightened her skirt, crossed her legs, and launched into it like she'd practiced in the mirror. "Because he's coasting," she said, tilting her head toward me without actually looking at me. "He has no real goals, no drive, no spark. I'm tired of watching him settle for the bare minimum." Miss Callahan nodded slowly, scribbling something. Holly went on. "He gets up, goes to work, comes home, and that's it. No ambition to advance. No desire to better himself. I love him, but it's exhausting being the only one who wants more." I caught the smallest movement from Miss Callahan. Her mouth tightened just a fraction at the word exhausting. "And how does that make you feel?" Miss Callahan asked. "Like I'm carrying us," Holly said. "Like if I don't push, nothing changes." Another note on the pad. "And you?" She turned to me. "I work," I said. "I pay the bills on time. I fix what's broken. I stay out of pointless drama. I just don't see a reason to light my hair on fire every week to prove I'm motivated." Holly let out a short laugh. "Low energy. That's what it is. He thinks keeping the lights on is enough." I gave her a look. Example, last month, the kitchen sink was leaking. I fixed it after work. Didn't even mention it. Next thing I know, she's telling me it was passive-aggressive because she didn't get to call a plumber. That's not what Miss Callahan held up a hand. "Let's stay on one point at a time. I'm hearing two different value systems here. One is task-oriented, steady maintenance. The other thrives on visible progress and recognition." Holly shifted in her chair. "Exactly. I can't get motivated by someone who hides in the background." I stayed quiet. "All right," Miss Callahan said. "Here's what I want for this week's homework. Both of you will keep a private log of what I'll call motivational interactions. Times you either encouraged each other, completed a task that benefits the other, or took initiative in some way. Don't discuss them. Bring the logs to the next session." Holly frowned. "But if we don't talk about them, how do we?" "That's the point," Miss Callahan said. "I want to see the raw data without influence." We wrapped up 10 minutes later. Holly barely waited until we hit the parking lot before she spoke. She didn't even address the core issue, she muttered, unlocking her car. I was expecting her to at least get you to admit you need a push. I slid into the passenger seat. Guess we'll see what the logs say. She started the engine hard enough to make the wipers twitch, eyes fixed straight ahead. I could tell she was already rewriting the session in her head, making it into a win for her. Fine. I keep my log. And I wouldn't leave anything out. The next Tuesday, I walked into the hub with my log tucked neatly into a folder. Dates, tasks, outcomes, clear as a maintenance record. Holly was already in Ms. Callahan's waiting area, flipping through her phone with a notebook so fat it looked ready to burst. Inside, Ms. Callahan greeted us and motioned for us to sit. Let's start with the logs, she said. I slid mine across first. 14 completed requests out of 17, I said. The 3 I missed were either impossible or contradicted something else she'd asked for. Holly's lips tightened, but she didn't say anything. Ms. Callahan skimmed my list. Can you give an example of a contradiction? Sure, I said. 2 weeks ago, she asked me to help her reorganize the garage on Saturday. That same Saturday, she also wanted me to go with her to her cousin's baby shower, an hour away. Both requests were for the same time. That's not, Holly started. Ms. Callahan held up a hand. You'll have your turn. She looked at me. And impossible. She wanted the back deck stained last weekend. It rained all day. Holly crossed her arms and set her notebook on her lap without opening it. All right, Holly, Ms. Callahan said. Let's hear your side. She didn't pass her notebook over. Instead, she leaned forward. He kills the energy in a room. He doesn't inspire me. It's not just about tasks. It's about presence. What does that mean, specifically? Ms. Callahan asked. It means I want someone who makes me want to do better, not someone who hides in the corner. I stayed quiet until Ms. Callahan looked at me. Funny thing about corners, I said. They're also where you stand when you're accused of being antisocial. Like last month, when she told me I never want to go anywhere. Then I reminded her she turned down that invite to Mike's party weeks before. She said she didn't feel like it. Ms. Callahan wrote something down. So, Holly, you declined the party? Yes, but... And then later cited it as proof he's antisocial? Holly's mouth opened, then closed. I guess so, she muttered. Ms. Callahan set her pen down. Here's what I'm seeing. Holly, you're interpreting his actions through your assumptions rather than his stated intent. You're making meaning out of behavior before confirming the reality. That's dangerous for any relationship. Holly shifted in her chair. So I'm just supposed to ignore it? No, Ms. Callahan said. You're supposed to ask. New homework. Neither of you is allowed to assume intent. If something's unclear, you ask for clarification in the moment. Directly. I nodded. Sounds good. Holly didn't answer right away. Finally, she said, fine. When the session ended, she walked out ahead of me. Usually, she'd start dissecting the meeting before we hit the parking lot. This time, she stayed quiet, keys already in her hand. I got in the car and buckled up. She started the engine without looking at me. The silence held all the way to the end of the block. It was the quietest ride home we'd had in months. By the third workshop, her notebook was half the size it had been. No stuffed pages, no bulging spine. She set it on the table with a kind of caution, like she knew Ms. Callahan would notice. So, Ms. Callahan said, folding her hands. How did the clarification exercise go? Holly glanced at me, then back at Ms. Callahan. Better than I thought. Sometimes I jump to conclusions. I was wrong about a few things. Such as, she hesitated. Like when he left early from the dinner at my parents'. I thought he was sulking. Turns out he'd gotten a text from work about a security alarm. He actually told me before he left. I just didn't hear it. I nodded once. Progress. Ms. Callahan smiled faintly. Good. Let's build on that. I leaned forward. Since we're talking about assumptions, can we touch on money? Holly's head turned sharp. What does that have to do with this? A lot, I said. You call me stingy for sticking to a budget, but you won't budget with me. Last month, you bought a $300 leather jacket and then panicked about your credit card bill. Her eyes narrowed. I needed a jacket for work. You have 4 in the closet, I said. Ms. Callahan held up her pen. Holly, when he brings up finances, how do you usually respond? I ask why he's so obsessed with every penny, she said quickly. And when he answers? She shrugged. It feels condescending. Like he's talking down to me. I couldn't help it. I laughed once low. You ask a question, I give a factual answer. That's not condescending. That's answering. Ms. Callahan tapped her pen. I'm hearing something important. Holly, you're framing his factual answers as tone-based rather than content-based. That makes it nearly impossible for him to give you useful information without being accused of condescension. Holly crossed her arms. So I'm supposed to just accept whatever he says? No, Ms. Callahan said. You're supposed to separate the data from your feelings about the delivery. And there's another pattern here. You seem to expect him to anticipate your needs without you stating them. That's not true, Holly said, but it came out too fast. Then give me an example of a specific request you've made that he hasn't met, Ms. Callahan said. Silence. Finally, Holly said, sometimes I want support without having to spell it out. Support means different things to different people, Ms. Callahan replied. For your homework, I want you to list exactly what makes you feel supported. Concrete actions, not vague ideas. We'll go through them together next week. Holly nodded stiffly, jotting something in her thin notebook. When we left, she walked a step ahead of me, clutching it like it was classified. I could tell she didn't like that the cracks were showing. We were barely in our seats before Holly let out a sigh like she'd been holding it for a week. The homework didn't work, she said, crossing her legs. Ms. Callahan picked up her pen. Why not? Because he was just checking boxes. That's not real support. I leaned forward. She asked me to check in about her workday with genuine interest. I did. Every day. Then she said it was fake because she had to ask for it. Holly's jaw tightened. It was fake. You didn't actually care. You were just doing it because it was on the list. Ms. Callahan set the pen down. So let me understand. You want him to spontaneously do something you value. But if you have to request it, it's invalid? That's right, Holly said without hesitation. That's a no-win scenario, Ms. Callahan said evenly. Spontaneous means he cares. Requested means he doesn't. There's no room for success in that setup. Holly turned toward me. You're twisting her words. I stayed calm. I'm repeating them. She whipped back to Ms. Callahan. He's manipulating this whole process so he looks reasonable and I look impossible. That's not what I'm seeing, Ms. Callahan said, voice steady. What I'm seeing are standards that shift depending on whether or not they're met. That's unsustainable. Holly scoffed. So I'm the problem now? I'm saying, MS. Callahan replied, that the patterns you've both described point to deeper issues, particularly with how expectations are communicated and how validation is tied to them. Holly's voice got sharper. Or maybe you're just taking his side because he's better at keeping score. Ms. Callahan didn't flinch. This isn't about sides. It's about the reality that if one partner is working against impossible criteria, the relationship becomes a series of failures by design. I watched Holly's grip tighten on her notebook. I'm recommending, Ms. Callahan went on, that we move into individual sessions alongside joint ones. That will give each of you space to unpack your own patterns without the pressure of the other person in the room. Holly shook her head. So now you think I need therapy? I think, Ms. Callahan said, you deserve the same opportunity he has to speak freely. That's not therapy. It's a chance to be heard without defensiveness from either side. Holly stared at her for a long second, then stood abruptly. Fine, do whatever you want. She snatched up her bag. I glanced at Ms. Callahan, who gave me the kind of look that said let her go. The door shut behind her hard enough to rattle the fake plant in the corner. When I showed up for my first solo session, the place felt different without Holly in the other chair. No tension in the air. No waiting for her to jump in and spin something sideways. Ms. Callahan smiled. So, just you today? Where do you want to start? I let out a breath. Relief, honestly. I didn't realize how much I braced myself at home until it stopped for a few days. She nodded. Tell me about that. For years, I've been called lazy, unmotivated, like I'm somehow failing because I'm not chasing the next shiny thing. I work hard. I keep the house running. I don't see the point in creating stress just to look ambitious. Ms. Callahan wrote a note. That's called goal shaming, making someone feel inadequate for not pursuing the same vision as another person. I sat back. Yeah, that's been my life. Every project I finish is invisible, but anything I don't do becomes proof I'm holding us back. Do you believe you've been holding the relationship back? I shook my head. No, I think I've been the anchor keeping it from spinning out. Her eyes met mine. And how does it feel to hear that you're not lazy? You're just operating on a different set of priorities? Validating. And a little infuriating that it took this long. We talked about patterns, how criticism had become the default mode in the house. I admitted I'd spent years second-guessing myself over simple choices because I knew they'd get picked apart. By the time the session ended, I felt lighter. On my way out, I noticed Holly's car in the lot. I decided to wait in mine. From the driver's seat, I could see through the window into Ms. Callahan's office. Holly was pacing, hands flying, face flushed. Then she sat, head in her hands. When she finally came out, she didn't spot me. She got in her car, slammed the door, and just sat there for a minute before driving off. That night, she walked in with her bag still over her shoulder. She says I have control issues, she said flatly, and a fear of being left behind. I kept my voice neutral. Sounds like she was honest with you. Holly dropped her bag on the couch and stared at me like she wasn't sure whether to be angry or relieved. 2 nights later, she came through the door already talking. Can you believe? She dropped her bag and kicked off her shoes. The recycling still isn't out, the sink's full, and you left the thermostat on 74. Do you know how much? I set down my coffee mug. I'm not going to be your emotional trash bin tonight. She froze mid-step. What? I'm happy to talk about what's actually bothering you, I said, but I'm not doing the rapid-fire list of grievances. Her mouth opened like she was going to argue, but then she leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. Fine. You want to know what's bothering me? My boss called me out in front of the whole team today. Said my presentation lacked focus. I nodded. That's different than a messy sink. She smirked, but it wasn't mean. Maybe, but the sink still annoyed me. Annoyed is fine, I said, but unloading on me as if I'm the problem, different story. She sighed and sat at the table. I guess I came in ready to pick a fight because I was still pissed from work. Better to say that up front. She looked at me for a long second, then shook her head. You're making it hard to stay mad. The rest of the night felt normal. Not tense, not eggshells, just 2 people talking. At our next joint session, she admitted it. I've been using him as my stress outlet. He calls me on it now. It's helping. Miss Callahan smiled. That's an important shift. What do you want to do with that progress? I'm going to keep the individual sessions, Holly said. Twice a week. That's a serious commitment, Miss Callahan said. Yeah, Holly answered. I think it's time I stopped making him the target. For once, I didn't feel the need to add anything. Over the next month, the air in the house actually felt different. No loaded silences. No surprise tests to see if I'd guess what she wanted. She'd walk in from work and say, I need 20 minutes to decompress, instead of throwing a grenade about the dishwasher. And I'd give her 20 minutes. One night while we were making dinner, she said, Can you handle the chicken while I set up for tomorrow's meeting? I don't want to burn it. Straightforward. No hidden meaning. Got it, I said, flipping the pan. By the time our next joint session rolled around, Miss Callahan noticed. I'm seeing a lot more cooperative language from both of you. Holly smiled. I've been working on asking directly for what I want instead of testing. That's a major step, Miss Callahan said. And you? She looked at me. I've learned how to say no without guilt. Boundaries are holding. Holly nodded. It's actually making it easier for me to own my moods instead of blaming him for them. Outside of the sessions, we were actually planning things again. Vacations, a small deck project, even a weekend road trip. Conversations that used to spiral into fights now ended with decisions. One evening, over coffee at the kitchen table, she said, You know, I used to resent how steady you were. It made me feel less impressive. I raised an eyebrow. Because I wasn't scrambling? Because you made it look easy, she said. And I thought if you weren't struggling, you weren't trying hard enough. I didn't say anything, just took a sip of coffee. That one didn't need a comeback. By the 10th session, Miss Callahan didn't even open her notebook right away. She just looked at us like she'd been waiting to hear how this ended. All right, she said. 10 weeks. What have you learned? Holly went first. I've been living in a fog, always keeping score of what he wasn't doing instead of seeing what he was. I made him responsible for how I felt about myself. Miss Callahan nodded. And why do you think that happened? Because it was easier to project my insecurities onto him than face them. Holly said, no hesitation. I kept my voice steady. I've learned I'm not lacking ambition. I've been held to standards that change depending on the day. That's not ambition. It's moving the goalposts. Miss Callahan leaned back. And how does it feel to say that out loud? Like I'm finally not on trial, I said. She smiled faintly, then turned to Holly. Hearing that, what comes up for you? That he's right, she said. I set standards I couldn't even define. And when he met them, I'd shift them again so I didn't have to admit I was the problem. That awareness, Ms. Callahan said, is exactly what will keep this from happening again, if you both keep using the tools you've practiced. Holly looked at me, eyes steady. I'm sorry. I demanded these workshops thinking they'd fix you. But they fixed me. It was quiet for a moment. Then Ms. Callahan said, not fixed, grown. Both of you. We stood to leave. Holly grabbed her bag, still looking at me like she was measuring whether I believed her. I do, I said before she could ask. We didn't say much as we walked to the truck. The parking lot was quiet, just the sound of our steps and the faint hum of traffic on the main road. Once we were in and buckled, she leaned back against the seat. I put you through years of criticism that had nothing to do with you, she said. It was me not being able to manage my own insecurities. I started the engine, but didn't pull out yet. Then it's a good thing you're managing them now. Wasting energy being angry about the past isn't going to help either of us. She looked out the windshield. Ms. Callahan says we should schedule occasional check-ins. Keep up the solo work. Make sure we don't slip back. I pulled onto the road. Sounds like the first plan we've had in a long time that we both actually want to follow. We drove in silence for a while. My mind wandered back to that first Sunday morning in the garage, the folder, the ultimatum, the smug way she told me it was non-refundable. I hadn't fought it then, and now I knew why. The irony made me smile. Agreeing without protest had taken all the wind out of her push to fix me, and somehow that had steered us right here. When we pulled into the driveway, I killed the engine. The garage door creaked open, same as it had months ago. The bike was still in its spot, my tools on the bench, coffee mug upside down in the rack. She stepped inside first, looking around like she was measuring the difference in the air. I thought I was fixing you, she said quietly. Turns out I was the one who needed fixing. I walked in beside her. We both just needed the truth.